I pushed the bedroom door open and the sight hit like a demand. Daniel's side of the bed stripped bare, a single damp shirt folded on the chair, and my gold pendant gone from the little dish by the lamp. Suspicion tightened my chest so hard I could hear the blood in my ears as I stepped over the sheet hem and checked the other surfaces with quick, certain hands. This was not a forgetting. This was a deliberate absence, and it announced itself before I had time to breathe. The apartment felt measured, as if someone had already counted the places I might look and removed the answer. I moved through the apartment in short, deliberate checks. The kitchen drawer where keys lived was closed. The scarf on the hall hook was still Daniel's, but the pair of slippers under the bench were missing. This narrowing of details, objects removed or left in precise isolation, shifted my suspicion into a clearer problem. Either he had left, or someone had been in our home and taken something that belonged to me. I told myself facts aloud as if that would turn the feeling into evidence. I work part-time at a small design studio 2 blocks from our building. I left for a late client call and came home at 11:30 because the elevator was slow and the stairs smelled like the laundry room. I had worn the gold pendant that night because it was small and warm against my collarbone. The pendant Daniel had bought me 3 years earlier after my first gallery showing. I placed my hand where the pendant should have rested and found only the flat skin of my sternum and the cool of the lamp switch. I called Daniel before I touched anything else. The call went straight to voicemail. I left it a thin, controlled message. "Daniel, are you home? The pendant is gone and your side of the bed is stripped." I pressed end and the apartment seemed to register the sound of my voice and file it as evidence against me. I told myself to wait, to collect, to not leap. The first shift came then, suspicion to disbelief. I told myself he must have an explanation. By 8 the next morning I was in the lobby of his office building. The receptionist recognized me and frowned in a way that meant neither pity nor surprise, only the practiced neutrality of a place that handled private problems in public spaces. I walked up 3 flights because the elevator felt too slow with the possibility of an explanation inside. Outside his office door I rehearsed how to ask without giving him the chance to close down. When I knocked, Daniel opened the door with the same measured face he'd kept since he and I had a falling out 2 summers ago about work and time and the way we split weekends. "Daniel," I said, "where's the pendant?" "Your side of the bed." He closed the door a fraction. "Maya," he folded his hands in front of him and kept his voice even. I didn't take it. His eyes stayed low for a beat, like he was measuring how many inches of blame he could accept. Then who did? My words were quick. "The shirt on the chair, my pendant, the slippers gone, the dish empty. Someone was in our apartment last night. I watched him for any small stutter or impulse. He avoided eye contact. I left early this morning." "I thought you knew." His sentence landed like a flat report and removed the space where anger would normally sit. "We traded short, sharp lines for 10 minutes. You left." I pressed with that shirt. I took the shirt to the gym. "I didn't take your jewelry, Maya." The exchange carried a second emotional shift. Disbelief to a slow dawning fear that something beyond the relationship was at work. He kept speaking in measured sentences about logistics and distance. I kept naming the items I had seen gone. "Daniel, there's a pattern here," I said. "Who would take a pendant and leave everything else? Who would fold his shirt and leave it like that?" His reply was the kind that ends arguments by refusing them. "I don't know. I'm sorry." The words fit together without texture. They did not explain who had been in our home or why a photograph of me might later appear on our living room wall. Rosa arrived before noon. She had the tote bag that clicked when she put it down and the statement scarf bright against her coat. When she walked into my apartment, she scanned the room with an exactness that made me feel seen and documented rather than questioned. "Maya, tell me what you found," she said. Her voice altered the energy. Rosa's was direct and pragmatic. She touched my arm, a quick, necessary contact that turned my spinning into action. "Daniel's side of the bed was stripped. The pendant is gone. There's a shirt on the chair folded like it was left purposely. The door was closed but not locked." I listed, each sentence a movement towards something I could not name yet. I left a voicemail. I handed her my phone. She read the message and made a small sound. "Okay, Rosa, we look for cameras, we call the building, and we check storage." He wouldn't just take the pendant to the gym. She put on a pair of gloves from her tote and moved toward the hall. We start with the places he uses. He has a storage locker at the unit by the river, doesn't he? I shook my head. He does. I can get the key. Her decisiveness moved me into search mode. The second mandatory emotion shift, fear into a focused, determined action, happened as we left my apartment and crossed the street. We reached the storage facility mid-afternoon. The concrete smelled faintly of dust and the vending machine hummed. The unit had Daniel's name was halfway down the row. He had always been methodical about his boxes, labels in neat marker, dates written in small print. Rosa pried the lock while I held the flashlight. The box we opened first contained old invoices and a neatly folded blazer. The second box had a ledger, a slim-bound book with dates and times and short notes, addresses, routines, a list of places I frequented. Rosa squinted at the ledger and said, "This is organized." Her hands hovered. I leaned over the page and read, Tuesday 7:15 p.m. coffee, 7th and Pine. Wednesday 8:30 a.m. gym main floor. The script was intimate and clinical. It recorded when I left for work, when I stopped at the drugstore, when I was usually home. My stomach tightened into a new shape. What began a suspicion was now a threaded line of observation. Said aloud, "Who keeps a log like this?" Rosa's answer was immediate. "Someone watching," she said. "Someone who cares enough to write down when you move." She glanced at me for more than the facts. She wanted to know how I would react and whether I could act. Under the ledger, in the same box, was a stack of Polaroids bound with a rubber band. The top one showed me asleep in our bed. The date was written in black pen. Last night. My breath left me so sharply I had to hold the crate. The image was blunt. My face relaxed against the pillow, hair splayed across the sheet. The pendant visible on my chest in the photograph, though, it had been gone from the dish when I returned. The photograph changed everything. Maya, Rosa, this is a breach. This is criminal. She did not speak louder. She did not need to. Her hands moved with the certainty of someone who had already made a call in her head. I felt rage and violation in equal parts. The ledger had shifted the fear into a new, angrier register. I wanted to grab Daniel and shake information out of him. I wanted to find the person who had been inside our home while I slept. We drove back with the Polaroids on the seat between us. Daniel was at the door when we arrived. His blazer was the same muted navy he always wore, and his face held that polite, distant calm. He read the room in one glance, and the features of his expression did not change. What did you find?" As if the question required a report. Rosa put the Polaroid on the hall table without saying a word. "Daniel, whose are these?" she asked. Her voice was flat and exact. I watched him like someone watching a clock in a room that will stop turning. He looked at the photograph and then at me. "I don't know where those came from," he said. "I didn't take them." There was a new beat in his avoidance. The ledger showed him having knowledge of my routine, or the person who had access might have knowledge tied to him. I leaned forward. "Daniel, the ledger has dates and times, and your storage is where we found them. Did someone else have access?" My sentence came out as a demand. He folded his hands and then pushed back from the table. "Maya." He used my name in a way that was meant to stop me. I didn't break in. "I didn't." He stopped. For the first time in the conversation, his jaw tightened. "If someone has been in the apartment, we call the police. We do it properly." He was pragmatic, careful, keeping the interaction legal and sterile. The exchange turned into the required confrontation. 3 quick lines that landed between us like a small battlefield. I said, "You knew something." "I didn't." "Rosa, we called the police." The officer came and walked through the apartment with a methodical manner that felt both clinical and humane. He noted small things. A thumbprint smudge on the inner knob, the clean cut where the lamp cord was repositioned, the pendant dish by the lamplight. He took photographs and a list. He me about people who might have motive. I told him Daniel's name, and the officer wrote it down without comment. "We will examine the Polaroids and the ledger. If someone has been in your home, we want to know who had access." His calm voice gave me anchors I could follow. That evening, Daniel and I sat at the small kitchen table under the yellow lamp, and our conversation moved through thin, controlled phrases. He spoke in measured sentences about evidence and protocol. I asked about the ledger again. He answered, "I don't know how it got there. My sentences came out faster. Then who did?" I asked. "Daniel, who wrote down the Tuesday coffee and the gym time, who took a photo of me sleeping." He folded his hands, avoided my eyes, and then said, "I will help you look. I will help the police." His measured willingness was not a confession, and it did not carry warmth. It carried only compliance. Rosa did not leave. She stayed until night and sat on the couch where the neighbors' light leaked through the blinds and made white stripes across her knees. She talked to me in lists. Lock the deadbolt, change the locks, check the security cameras on my floor, call the storage facilities manager for records. She also asked one quiet question. "Maya, when did you last feel safe in this apartment?" I had to stop and consider. The answer had moved over months. I said, "The last time I felt safe here was the night he brought the pendant to my table." The sentence named a concrete memory. The gallery opening, the laughter that night, Daniel's hand brushing mine. Naming it changed the shape of what had been taken. The ledger and the Polaroids were a twist that forced me to see earlier nights. A small moment 3 weeks earlier came back with new weight. The night I woke and found a folded note on the kitchen counter that said, "We should talk." I had thought then it was his late work hours. Now the note suggested an observer, someone paying attention to private signals. That realization was a mid-chapter cliffhanger that made my stomach drop open. If someone had been recording me, then the removal of the pendant read as more than theft. It read as an act of erasure. We went back to the storage facility records the next day with the police officer. The manager provided the sign-in sheet. Daniel's name was on the sheet, dated Times Neat in his hand. There were also 3 other signatures that could not be matched immediately. The officer took photos and noted them. Yes, it could be stealing to cover tracks or someone close using access as camouflage. We will check CCTV. We will match handwriting. We will do forensics on the photos. Each procedural sentence was both comfort and a slow, grinding delay while I waited to know who had been in our home. That evening when we returned, the door was unlocked. My chest dropped in a way that pushed air from my lungs. The living room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and wet cardboard. A Polaroid I had not seen earlier was taped to the living room wall at eye level. A picture of me sitting at the kitchen table the week before, head down, a coffee mug in my hands. The date on that photograph was 2 days earlier. Someone had come into the apartment while we slept, or while I thought the space was private, and placed that image where I would notice it. I stared at the photograph. My fingers curled on the backs of my hands. The photograph made the private public in one clean move. It reframed the situation. This was not simply a break-in. It was a sequence of acts meant to move me, and perhaps Daniel, into a new arrangement where our pattern of daily life could be observed, recorded, and altered. My emotional reaction shifted again, this time into a brittle clarity, violation to resolve. I stood up and said, "We leave tonight." The sentence felt final and precise. Daniel reacted in his low, restrained way. "We should wait for the police." He said we should follow procedure. His voice wanted to contain the harm in rules. Rosa slid across and touched my arm. "Maya, you go. Take what you need. I'll stay and make the calls. Daniel, change the locks now. Do not sleep here." Her voice did not ask permission. I packed the pendant's old chain that still smelled faintly of my skin and a single sweater. I pulled on my worn leather jacket. My movement was small and deliberate. I did not say goodbye. I walked down the building steps into the gold of the streetlight and the river beyond it. The city smelled of wet concrete and bus brakes. I kept my hands in my pockets so I would not fidget. My heart was steady with the small, practical decisions I had made: leave, secure, call. The chapter's immediate conflict, the violation of my home, and the discovery that I had been watched. Reached a resolution in my choice to leave that night and to place my next actions under the control of evidence and witnesses. Rosa called a friend who lived nearby and drove me to her apartment. She stayed on the phone with the storage manager and with the officer until the line went quiet. Daniel locked the apartment behind him with a set of keys he claimed belonged to him, and he promised to meet us at the station if the police required it. "I'll give them whatever they need." I heard the sentence and accepted it as a fact, not a promise of anything more. At Rosa's building, I sat on the couch with a blanket over my legs and held the small pendant chain between my fingers. The chain had a tiny scratch where the clasp had caught once, and I traced that scratch slowly, naming the minutes of the gallery night. The way his voice had sounded when he said, "You did this," that memory anchored me to a before that still existed like a photograph I could hold. It also reminded me that something had been taken not only from the apartment, but from the pattern of my trust. Before sleep, I texted Daniel. "Thank you for calling the police. Please don't come by tonight," he replied with 3 words. "I'll stay reachable." The reply was short and measured. It did not ask for forgiveness, and it did not offer intimacy. It did, however, perform the role he had settled into across our relationship. Steady, composed, minimal. I felt a quiet anger at that shape and folded it into action. In the morning I would make a list. I would change locks. I would press the police for SecTV. I would demand the security footage from the storage facility. Those actions were the form my agency would take. I slept badly on Rosa's couch and woke with a tight jaw. The ledger and the Polaroids had rewritten the story of our apartment into something I could now see as evidence, rather than as a slow dissolving of feeling. The chapter closed with a concrete situational beat. I packed the pendant and a few belongings and walked out into the quiet golden hour street. The pendant's tiny chain catching the light once as I set it in my pocket, forcing me to decide what I would do with the rest of my life under this new knowledge. That step away from the door was the action I could own, and it ended the chapter on a specific motion rather than on a reflective line. I slipped into the glass lobby and watched Daniel press a small velvet pouch into a woman's palm. Suspicion tightened my throat the way a fist clamps on a breath. I had not expected to find him in the building tonight, much less handing something to someone I did not recognize. My foot dragged on the marble and my hand reached for the pendant at my neck out of habit, as if checking it would tell me whether what I saw was real. The pendant was gone from the dish by my lamp. I had found that empty space the night I pushed open the bedroom door and saw his side of the bed stripped. I had felt that same tightness in my chest then. This moment in the lobby made the earlier discovery mean something else. I took 2 steps forward. The woman turned her head and the high lobby light washed Daniel's face in hard lines. He saw me before I stepped all the way into the glow. His shoulders drew back, the velvet pouch closed around the woman's fingers like a secret. I heard my pulse in my ears and the lobby clock tick once. "Daniel," I said aloud, and the sound landed thin in the high, ceilinged room. He kept his voice measured. "Maya." He did not step toward me. The woman folded the pouch into her bag with a practiced calm and nodded at him as if they had finished a transaction. Suspicion pushed me forward. It was a sharp edge under my skin that made my palms damp and my voice flatter than I wanted. "Who is she?" I demanded. The words came out short. I used his name because saying it made the exchange feel accountable. He looked at the woman, then at me, then away. "She's a colleague I met on a project," he said. "I owed her something." It was routine. His sentences were clipped, the way he shaped them when he wanted to end a line of questioning. I had learned his patterns. Measured words, small pauses, hands folded to hold emotion back. Those patterns had kept us comfortable until comfort had become the thing between us. The woman moved toward the elevator and said, "Good night," to both of us. Her smile did not reach her eyes. She pressed the velvet pouch closer to her bag and stepped inside the elevator. The doors closed with a soft hum. Rosa's number flashed across my screen before I could decide what to do. I tapped it and then let it go to voicemail. I did not want to explain. I wanted someone who would force an answer. The lobby emptied. Daniel folded his hands in front of him and finally looked at me properly. "Explain," I said. My voice had the short, hard-tone racism training had taught me to use when I couldn't rely on shock. "Explain now." I kept my hands out where he could see them. He ran a thumb along his watch band. "I can't do this in the lobby, Maya. Please." He glanced at the security desk that watched us like an indifferent judge. I stepped out onto the sidewalk before I thought about consequences. The dusk had turned the street glassy and a faint drizzle feathered the pavement. "You gave her a pouch with my pendant inside," I said. The accusation was a beam of light. It demanded either denial or confession. Daniel's jaw worked. "You saw the pouch." "I don't know what you think it means." His voice was low. "You don't know what I think." I raised my voice. "You left my pendant from the dish by the lamp. You left your side of the bed empty. Then you hand something wrapped in velvet to another woman in the lobby. My sentences came faster now, each a small weapon. Cars slid past. A man with bakery boxes crossed the street and glanced over, curiosity quick in his face. He stepped back. Maya, listen. He kept his eyes on the pavement. There are things I can't tell you yet. I was trying to sort them out without dragging you into it. Rosa arrived before I could answer. She pushed through the lobby doors with her scarf pulled tight and her bag thumping at her hip. Maya, she asked, and then her eyes took in Daniel and the woman who had already left. His name like a small accusation, Daniel Hart. She came to stand beside me, close enough that her shoulder touched mine. Rosa's presence changed how I sounded. Sharper, more direct. Daniel, who was that? She demanded. He looked at Rosa and for the first time his measured calm split. Rosa, it's not what you think. Then tell us what it is. She snapped. Her hands went to her tote as if pulling steadiness from its straps. Don't walk away. Don't give us half words. Rosa's voice carries. When she speaks, people either answer or step aside. Daniel's fingers tightened at his side. You can't follow me in there, he said, please. I asked. Rosa stepped forward. We are not asking, we are following. She didn't wait for permission. Her heels clicked against the marble as she turned and pushed toward the elevators. I followed her because Rosa's energy is an argument made into motion. The elevator light read 22 and the doors opened on Daniel's floor with a soft ding. He went in ahead of us, the elevator closing on him like a trap. Rosa and I moved to the corridor. The office suite doors were rows of identical wood and frosted glass. Daniel's nameplate was small and conservative. Rosa glanced at me. We go in or we call the desk. She whispered. I touched the small scar at my left eyebrow without thinking. The scar was a private map of a childhood scrape. It steadied me. We go in, I said. The office door was unlocked. Daniel's chair faced away from the door and his laptop screen glowed with a document I could not read from the doorway. There was a neat stack of papers on his desk, a coffee cup with a lipstick smudge at the rim I had never noticed before, and an empty dish where I remembered placing my pendant the night I checked the nightstand. The empty dish punched a hole through me the way an actual fist would. Rosa moved straight to the credenza and ran her fingers along the drawers until she found the one that clicked open, locked. She muttered, and then her eyebrows climbed. She pulled a paper receipt from the top drawer. It had a storage facility address and a unit number printed in bold. Where did you get this? I asked, the question a small, insolent thing. Rosa had already found a small brass key tucked under a file. She held it up like proof. It's stamped with Unit 17, she said. I felt a shift between suspicion and an odd, restless clarity, a decision that the night would not end with questions in a lobby. The clarity made my legs move. We go now, I said it, and there was no softness in the command. We left the building with the receipt between us like a map. Night had deepened. The drizzle had stopped, leaving the city smelling of wet concrete and retail coffee. Rosa drove. I watched the streetlights throw gold on the windshield and thought about the pendant, the dish, the damp shirt folded on the chair I had seen earlier. Memory and evidence recalibrated the quiet I had been living in. At the storage facility the gate clanked behind us. The fluorescent lights hummed thin, and the corridor smelled of dust and metal. We fed the key into the lock for Unit 17, and it turned with a small, decisive click. The door rolled up. Inside, someone had laid things out with a careful hand. A soft sweater I recognized lay folded beside a small shoebox labeled with a tidy, masculine script. My pendant rested on top of a pile of old photographs, its gold catching the harsh fluorescent light and making it look small and trivial and cruel. A folded note sat atop the photographs. I picked up the note with 2 fingers as if it might break. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was Daniel's. Tight, even strokes. The words were short. I cannot let you be dragged into this. One line read. That line changed the angle of everything. The presence of the pendant in this storage unit collapsed certain possibilities and opened another. Protection as a reason for distance. A security guard's footsteps echoed in the corridor. A light flashed on my phone. An unknown number sent a text that made the back of my neck prickle. Stop looking. The text was mechanical, devoid of punctuation, and it felt like a hand sliding across a surface to erase a name. Rosa folded her arms. Who does that? She said. I slid the pendant into my palm and felt its weight. My fingers closed around it and the metal warmed to my skin. Suspicion had loosened into anger, and then into a cold spike of fear when the guard rounded the corner. What we were doing there. His voice was more curious than threatening. I answered plainly, we have a key. We opened a unit. Those are our things. I kept my sentence short so the guard could not find a place to wedge doubt. He peered into the unit, then at us, then at the receipt. I've been here a long time. I can call the manager if you want to make it official. His demeanor suggested we might be trespassers or partners in a misunderstanding. A text arrived as the guard took a step toward his radio. The screen flashed with the same unknown number and the line read, "Stop, walk away." This time the message had a time attached. 110 to comply. The timestamp made it feel like an order with a deadline. Rosa swallowed. "We can't leave now," she said. "We have evidence here." She looked at me as if to measure how dangerous my willingness to keep pushing might be. I tucked the pendant under my sweater. The gold lay warm against my skin and the warmth anchored me. "We finish looking, then we go to the police," I said. The plan was brittle, but it had a shape. On the way back to the car, a shadow detached itself from beside a row of metal doors. A figure moved fast enough that my first instinct was to duck. Someone lunged toward me. An arm hooked at my shoulder and a force pushed into my chest. I staggered. The alley compressed into a single instant of movement. Daniel stepped between me and the attacker. He did not shout. He moved with a quick, unexpected urgency. A fist landed on him and he went down with a sound that lodged in my throat. The attacker's face was obscured by a hood. I reached for Daniel's arm. "Daniel," I shouted. The word tore out of me. Rosa grabbed the assailant's sleeve and twisted. He broke free and ran. Daniel breathed heavily, a cut at his brow gashing dark red. He tried to stand, wobbling on his feet. "Are you?" Rosa started. Daniel pressed a hand to the wound and laughed, a rough sound that was half apology. "I told you I couldn't explain. He looked directly at me for the first time that night in a way that had nothing to do with measured sentences. "I tried to protect you." "Protect me? From what?" I demanded, steadying myself on the hood of the car. Rain that had started again to fall dotted the metal, small quick beads that made bright specks on the surface. He swallowed. Blood darkened the skin at his temple. "Someone has been watching. I thought I could fix it before it reached you." I was wrong. His voice was thin and urgent. "Rosa, call an ambulance if you need to, but listen, Maya, you can't go back to the apartment tonight." His eyes found mine and there was no pleading, only an attempt to trade information on a thin table. Rosa's fingers dug into the car paint. "Who is watching?" she demanded. Daniel's hand trembled around his wristband. "I don't know their name. I only know their methods. I found photos in Unit 17, pictures of you asleep, of the pendant by the lamp, of the empty side of the bed. I thought removing those things would stop them noticing you." I was wrong. His words came faster now, spilling as if urgency could fill the gaps his silence had left. Shock hit like a physical shove. My mouth went dry. I had recognized the pendant, the dish gone from the nightstand. I had not imagined a line between those private moments and someone else's camera. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. My voice was small, but the question carried weight, "Because if I told you then, you'd have been part of whatever came next," he said. He kept his gaze steady on mine. I thought I could handle it. I thought keeping distance would keep you safe. His words were not an excuse. They were a raw accounting. I felt anger flare and then cool into a pragmatic sort of fear. The unknown texts, the storage unit with my things, the velvet pouch in the lobby, they rearranged the shape of his distance. There was a moment where everything I had interpreted as indifference could be a strategy. Rosa bent down to help him to his feet. "Daniel, you can't keep making unilateral decisions about Maya's life," she said. Her voice was flat and sharp. "You tell her and you tell us everything you know. Now." He blinked. Blood streaked down his temple and his voice swallowed. "There's an address in those receipts for a person who rents units under different names. I thought if I could track the chain, I could find them and stop them. I didn't expect them to jump now." An ambulance's distant wail shifted the night's air. It moved us into motion. I put my hand on Daniel's shoulder because the action felt necessary. We had been circling each other all night with words and withheld facts. My hand on his was a small test of whether I still trusted him to be in front of danger. He met my eyes. "I'm sorry I left you with questions. I'm sorry I wasn't honest about the storage. I wanted to fix it before it hurt you," he swallowed. "I don't want you to go back to the apartment tonight." The words landed and changed the choice I had planned to make. I had intended to storm his apartment, to demand answers amid sheets and receipts. Now there was blood, an attacker, and a direct warning. Rosa kept speaking in practical terms. "We call the police. We file a report. We find the manager who signed the receipts. We stop assuming and start documenting." She pushed information at the night like a lifeline. I fumbled my phone and sent the message I had hesitated over all evening. "I'm at the storage. I found the pendant. Don't come home tonight," I wrote to Daniel and then to Rosa. "I need you to make calls." Rosa read the folded note. Daniel had left in Unit 17 again and pulled out a photograph. My living room, the dish with the pendant empty, the shirt on his chair. She tapped it with a decisive finger. "He didn't take it for himself," she said. "He moved your things. That matters." The arrival of actual officers meant lights spattering blue across the alley and the small, steady click of their boots on asphalt. Then what we knew. The velvet pouch, the storage receipt, the note in Daniel's handwriting, the text messages. The officer took photos with the phone like a clerk cataloging evidence, careful and meticulous. At one point an officer asked Daniel, "Why didn't you bring her here sooner?" The officer's tone was blunt, expecting practical answers. Daniel looked at me. He did not answer with a speech. He answered by showing the cut along his temple and the scraped knuckles. "I was trying to sort it, and I thought I could stop it before it reached her." That was his truth in plain clothes. Action taken without consent. The officers left us with a promise to check Unit 17 and to follow up, and they advised us to go to the emergency room to get Daniel patched up. Rosa insisted on staying. "You are not going anywhere alone, Maya," she said. We climbed back into her car. Rain had turned the street into a sheet of reflective silver. Dawn was still hours away, but sleep had slipped into the edges of my vision like thread. My thumb rubbed at the pendant under my sweater. The metal comforted and weighed me. Inside the car, Daniel's voice came down to a quieter register. "I should have told you earlier about the receipts and the unit. I tried to handle it. I'm sorry." He kept his sentences short. He had not learned to make grand declarations. His remorse found shape in small clauses. "Sorry doesn't bring back my pendant or explain the text telling me to stop looking," I said. I felt anger inclined toward him again, brittle and useful. He exhaled. "I know." Rosa broke the silence. "We go to the manager in the morning. We give the police everything. We change locks. We file for surveillance footage. We make a paper trail." She listed what needed to be done with the speed and focus of someone setting tasks against a timer. "Maya, are you going back to the apartment tonight?" I looked at the pendant under my sweater against my sternum. It was a small loop of gold, an object that had been ordinary until suddenly it meant evidence and bait. The memory of the empty dish in my nightstand returned like a scene I could replay. The missing pendant had been the first proof that someone was inside the private edges of our home. Daniel's face in the lobby, the velvet pouch, those things altered the story. I thought of sleeping in my own bed with the knowledge that someone had photographed me asleep. I thought of the way Daniel had folded distance to protect me, and how that distance had left me to wake alone and discover theft. I could feel my decisions moving from suspicion to deliberate caution. Rosa's hand found mine, squeezing. "Whatever you decide, we do it together," she said. I typed a single message. "I won't go back tonight. I'm going to Rosa's place. Meet me there in the morning with what you have." I hit send and felt a small relief in the action. Choosing not to return was a concrete step. It shifted the scene from confusion to a strategy. We parked at a diner while the car heater breathed warm air into the windows. We waited for an hour in a booth pressed against the glass, hands wrapped around cheap diner mugs. Conversation moved between practical tasks and moments where each of us asked questions we already knew the answers to but needed to hear. We called the storage facility manager. He confirmed Unit 17 had been rented under a series of aliases. The documentation would need time. It would also become a paper trail. When Rosa and I walked me up the narrow steps to her apartment at 3 in the morning, I kept my hand on the pendant tucked under my sweater. The street smelled of wet tar and the light from the corner shop made small squares on the sidewalk. I thought about going back to bed at my apartment and about armor I could wear that would make it harder for an intruder to photograph me. I thought about what it meant that Daniel had bled in front of me and said he had tried to protect me. Rosa unlocked her door and pushed me inside. "Sleep here," she said. "If anything changes, call. If anyone knocks at your door, don't open." She set down her keys and crossed her arms as if closing a case. She was practical in a way that made fear manageable. I lay on her small couch with the pendant against my palm. The gold was real and heavy. It proved nothing and everything at once. I could feel the days shift in my jaw. Tight decision, shaped. I sent one more message to Daniel. "Thank you for coming between them and me tonight. We need answers. We'll meet in the morning." I did not say the other thing I wanted to say. That I was angry at the choice he had made to manage danger alone. Rosa turned off the lamp. The room went to the quiet hum of appliances and the soft hiss of city sound outside the window. I held the pendant and thought about the photograph on the floor of Unit 17 and the velvet pouch in the lobby and the cut at Daniel's temple. I thought about the night I had opened the bedroom door and found the dish empty and his shirt folded on the chair. In the very last moment before I let my eyes shut, I made a choice that had a shape to it. I would not return to the apartment that morning. I typed the single line to Rosa and then to Daniel and hit send. The act itself felt like a small, decisive piece of movement. My phone chimed with the police officer's text. They would check Unit 17 again at first light and report any surveillance they could access. I turned the pendant over between my fingers once more, felt its simple form, and placed it beneath my pillow. I did not go back to Daniel's apartment that morning. I shoved the glass door open and saw Daniel press a small velvet pouch into the woman's hand at his desk. Betrayal hit before I had words. My voice went thin and small in the wide office. Anna Morales had both hands on the pouch. Daniel folded his hands and looked at me the way he had when we argued about bills, polite, closed off. I had come to his corner office with a question. The question became a confrontation in the first 3 strides down the hallway. I stepped between them and caught the edge of the desk with my palm. The office smelled of printer toner and Daniel's aftershave. Betrayal pushed me forward. The pouch was in Anna's lap, brown fingers pressed to the suede. "What is that?" I said. Daniel's face did what it always did when he wanted less to do with feeling and more with logic. He flattened. "Maya," he said, "you shouldn't be here." His voice was low, careful, like a ledger entry. Anna looked up. "I'm Anna," she said. "I work with Daniel on the West account." Her mouth held a small, practiced smile. The word "practiced" was a new detail I noticed and registered as a danger. I moved the pouch with my index finger. The pendant was inside, the chain tucked around it. I recognized the little gold circle. It had been missing from the dish on our nightstand since the night I found his side of the bed stripped bare. The first emotion I felt was betrayal. The second was the sharp, cold recognition that this moment was not new. It was the late, final act of things that had been narrowing for months. Doubt had lived in our apartment for weeks. The missing pendant, the damp shirt folded on a chair, the quiet dinners. Anger followed the doubt like breath. "Daniel, what is this?" I said. My mouth moved quicker than my brain. Voices from the lobby, a floor below, carried up the stairwell. Footsteps, a cart, a janitor's radio, ordinary sounds that made the scene more brittle. Daniel's hands stayed folded. "Maya, sit down. We can talk about this later." He did not say my name the way people say names when they want to soften a hit. He hit as if to classify me. I stepped closer and put the pouch on the desk. The chain caught the light. I said, "My pendant." The room rearranged around that sentence. Anna's eyebrows moved. Daniel's jaw tightened. Anna reached for the pouch. I thought. She began. "Don't touch it," I said. The line came out flat and hard. My palms were sweating. I did not want people to see that my hands shook. My hands had been steady for so long. Rosa's arrival was an external event that broke the narrowing corridor into something else. She pushed through the doorway without knocking and planted her tote on the floor. "Maya," she said, and then she saw the pouch. "What the hell?" Her voice cut like a blade. Rosa's presence shifted the room. She moved toward Daniel with the purposeful stride she used at group projects. "Daniel, give me that." Her hand closed on the edge of the desk. Daniel did not move his hands. He watched Rosa as if she were a meeting attendee asking for an explanation on a spreadsheet. "Anna, are you?" Rosa started, and then Anna slid her chair back a little as if to create distance. Daniel finally spoke. "I arranged some transfers, Maya. I told you I wanted a clean separation." He used the word separation the way he used the word budget. Technical, final. My breath shortened. Betrayal shifted to stunned anger. I said, "You moved money without telling me." The question wasn't elegant. It did need to be. Daniel's voice was calm. "I signed papers. I had counsel draft a separation agreement. I thought it would be better done quietly." He met my eyes with a look that tried to measure me like a cost. Rosa slammed her hand on the desk. "You thought what would be better? For you to walk out and take everything? For her to have proof before I even knew this man existed? She my name too, Maya, sharp with protection." Anna's chair scraped. I didn't know anything about their personal life. Daniel gave me the pouch to hold for a moment while we finished a client item. Her tone was flat, like she expected to be believed because of her composure. The second external event arrived with a small, sealed envelope sliding across the desk. Anna pushed it forward with her palm, paper whispering on wood. She opened it on the spot. Inside were final legal papers and bank transfer receipts. One page had Daniel's signature under the date 2 weeks prior. Another showed an outgoing transfer that matched my account number with a blank I hadn't authorized. The numbers were precise. The betrayal had paperwork. My legs stopped working in the way I had learned to notice when emotions became heavy. They felt like hallway tiles under someone else's feet. My hands found the receipts and the papers as if those objects could explain what the absence of the pendant could not. Daniel watched me with the same cool restraint he used when presenting quarterly results. Daniel Hart, Rosa slowly, saying his full name in a way her students used when they meant business. "Explain this." She had a list of questions ready the way she kept recipes ready for anyone in need. Daniel swallowed. He moved his eyes to the window and then back. I couldn't do the conversations the right way. I couldn't face it. I thought a clean break would be kinder. I arranged the accounts, transferred what belongs to you to a separate hold, updated the lease. "I'm sorry, Mayor." I'm sorry the way someone might tick a box. The third emotion shift arrived then, from shock and anger into a hard, clinical clarity. I felt my own thoughts separate from the trimmer in my hands. Clarity did not feel gentle. It felt pragmatic. I read the receipts. The transfer would restrict access, but not wipe out what we had built. The lease on the apartment remained my name. The pendant was here. The pendant was evidence. "You could have talked to me," I said. "You could have told me you felt this way." My voice was small and demanded the space it deserved. "You took my pendant as if you'd already decided I wouldn't need it." I pulled the pendant from the pouch and held it between my thumb and forefinger. The gold was warm from the desk lamp. Daniel's mouth opened once. He fixed his watch. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want us arguing in front of people. He it like a fact. Rosa laughed a short, sharp sound. "You didn't want a scene, Daniel. You signed your name on legal documents and then handed the symbol of their life together to someone else. That's not avoiding a scene. That's manufacturing a result." She raised her voice. "Mayor, you didn't deserve this." Her hand gripped my arm hard in a way that said, "Hold on." I put the pendant in my palm and felt its weight. The chain ran through my fingers. The pendant was small and ordinary. It was not a symbol. It was the truth of a promise I had believed in. "What did you sign?" I asked. My voice had that clipped quality I used in meetings when I needed facts. I was still angry, but anger now had a ledger. Daniel slid a folder toward me. "Legal separation paperwork. Counsel advised a non-contested filing to avoid pushback from investors and to protect both parties' professional standing. I paid for counsel. I transferred some liquid assets into a hold. You can contest it, or we can sit down and what?" I interrupted. "Sit down and negotiate the timing of my own disappearance." I dug the pendant into my hand like a small pin. My voice shook, and the shaking had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with being unmoored. The room's dynamics shifted again when Daniel tried to stand up and leave. He slipped the folder under his arm and moved toward the door. "Mayor, I'm leaving. This is done." He reached for his coat. I moved faster than I expected. I stepped in front of him and reached for the folder. Hands collided. Daniel pushed my shoulder with a brief, practiced force, not violent but determined. Rosa stepped forward and put her body in the doorway. "Stop, Rosa, Daniel, you are not walking out with those papers." Her voice had the edge of someone who had prepared for confrontation in advance and then decided not to be polite about it. He tried to go around us. Anna rose in a way that made her look small and trapped behind the desk. For the first time in public, Daniel's fastidious composure slipped. He moved with the irritation of a man whose plan had been interrupted. He shoved the folder into his briefcase and tried to push past. I grabbed his sleeve. "Daniel, stop. Look at me." My voice was direct. He froze. He looked at me in a way that finally forced his face to show something other than a boardroom mien. His eyes landed on the pendant in my hand, and something like regret crossed his features for a second. "Mayor, this is not the time," he started. "It is always the time when you think you removing me from your life on someone else's schedule," I said. My throat closed and I had to pause. That pause was a pivot. Betrayal turned to grief. Not the vast poetic grief you hear about in novels, but the precise physical grief of a chest contracting, a throat tight, a throat making noise when you try to swallow. A small crowd had gathered near the office entrance. Someone whispered. An elevator dinged. The janitor passed the window and glanced up. The moment felt public and private at once. Rosa produced her phone and dialed an attorney we'd used years before for a landlord question. She spoke in short sentences, delivering facts. "We need a walk through of the transfers. We need the council's contact. Bring everything, bank receipts, names, dates." She used my name in her sentences like an anchor. Anna swallowed. "I didn't know he'd file anything without you," she said. "If I'd known." Her apology went unfinished. Rosa cut her off. "Anna, you keep your hands off of his gifts to her next time. We are sorting this here and now." Rosa's tone was a mix of warning and instruction. We then moved into the next beat. The stairwell scramble that would become the chapter's climax. Daniel tried to leave through the narrow service stairs. Rosa followed. I followed. The building smelled of cleaning solvent in the stairwell. The lights buzzed. The handheld banality of the stairs made the collision physical. Daniel reached the stairwell door with the briefcase and tried to step out. I put my hand on the jamb to stop him. He shoved gently, then harder. I grabbed the briefcase strap as it swung by. The papers slipped and fluttered onto the tile. Receipts scattered. For a second, the world reduced to paper and the sound of pages on tile. "Daniel, pick them up," I said. My voice was the flat sound of someone cataloging loss. He bent to gather the pages. Rosa backed up into the stairwell wall and kept eye contact with him. "Pick them up and hand them over." "Daniel," she said. He straightened, paper in hand, and for one terrible instant looked like a man who had been discovered doing something he had calculated would stay hidden. Then he tried to push past. My shoulder hit the stair rail and my hip banged the concrete. I could feel the adrenaline push my legs into motion. There was a quick exchange between us. 3 sharp lines of dialogue, the rapid back and forth the rules demanded in an argument. "Let go of the bag, Daniel. Give me that." "No," I answered. "Daniel, stop, Maya. This is making things worse. We already are in the worst, Daniel." "Now face it." The lines came out short, precise, and raw. I used my weight to wedge his chest against the wall. The briefcase slipped free. A legal envelope slid out and banged on the stairs. The signed papers peeked from the flap. He tried to snatch them back. I grabbed the envelope and opened it. A final notice, a bank transfer confirmation, a letter from council with a stamped date. The separation was initiated weeks ago. When the stairwell door opened and security arrived because someone else in the corridor had called down, Daniel folded. He stopped fighting for the moment and let the paper fall out of his hands. "Security questions." Daniel gave his version. Rosa answered. Calm, direct, and with the names of the transactions. The stairwell confrontation was the peak the chapter had led toward. My body was the instrument of that peak. A grabbed sleeve, a slipped briefcase, papers on tile. My emotions had shifted again, anger into a sharp, clear resolve. I wanted the facts, not an apology. I wanted the truth, not a later softening. They left with Daniel's briefcase, but the papers remained in my hands. When we got home in the pale light before dawn, Rosa and I spread the documents on my kitchen table. The kettle clicked on and off. The apartment smelled like instant coffee and stale air from closed windows. We sat at the small table with the papers like a map of what had been done. These transfers placed the funds in a hold for 90 days. Rosa, he can petition, but we have evidence. We can contest this. She tapped the receipt. She had already made a list. Council, bank contacts, lease clauses. She spoke in short bursts, action sentences. I wrote names down on a napkin. I could see the old dish by the lamp where the pendant had been kept. It was empty. I had carried the pendant in my pocket all along like an accusation and a proof. Finding the chain had felt like finding a missing puzzle piece. I felt anger at the pendant for reminding me that promises had been physical acts he had removed. We called an attorney. She me to describe what Daniel had done in direct terms. I told her. She for dates. I gave them. Rosa repeated names and places. The legal voice on the phone translated my raw sentences into steps. A small, surprising twist arrived then. In the packet of receipts there was a second name on an earlier transfer, a payment to a private account labeled Security Deposit Return, but with a routing that matched Anna's company. That detail reframed things. Anna had not been merely holding a pouch as a favor, there had been coordination. The twist added a new piece to the betrayal. It pushed it from private failure to coordinated action with third-party involvement. Rosa's jaw tightened. We need that bank name now. She tapped her phone. Her fingers moved fast. Maya, do you want me to call her? She asked. Yes, I said. My voice had the practical tone I'd used in committees. I did not feel cinematic catharsis. I felt the satisfaction of a list getting ticked. We went over the receipts again. We found the clause in the lease Daniel had altered. He had added a release clause that would have made the lease transfer easier if we did not contest in 60 days. The clause alone did not remove me from the apartment, but together with the transfers it would have allowed him to claim practical separation. He had moved like someone trimming a margin, not like someone tearing a fabric. There were moments of small, concrete action that registered as emotional movement. I returned the pendant to the little dish by the lamp, then took it back out and slipped it on. The chain felt familiar against the hollow under my collarbone. I breathed around it. I did not declare anything grand. I tied a small travel bag. I folded a few clothes. These were the actions of someone deciding not to stay in a house that had become a ledger. Rosa packed a thermos and a spare sweater. She put a hand on the counter and looked at me. Maya, you don't have to do this alone. I will be there with you. We will sort the transfers. We will talk to council. But you get out of that apartment today if you want to. Her hand on the counter was concrete. It was a thing that asked for a choice. I packed the pendant in its box and then took it out again. I caught myself thinking about the morning he had left his side of the bed stripped bare, the memory I'd kept like a wound. The damp shirt on the chair, the empty space beside me. I could place the present moment next to that morning and see a line of small decisions stretching back. There was no invented fate there, only actions and omissions. We left the documents on the table. I took the apartment keys and slid my hand along the hallway wall where the paint had nicked from years of coats being hung. I paused in the doorway. Rosa waited outside in the stairwell with the building key. Dawn was coming in a soft gold that made the hallway look kinder than it felt. Are you sure? Rosa, yes, I said. My voice was steady in a way that surprised me. I kept the pendant in my palm until I stepped over the threshold. Then I put it in my pocket. At the building door, I locked the apartment behind me and turned the key. The click of the lock was the last small sound of the chapter's dismantling. Rosa slid an arm through mine and held me close for half a second. Her hug was not a speech. It was a squeeze that said, we will get to work. We walked out into the street together. The morning smelled like cold pavement and coffee shops opening. I held the pendant in my palm as we moved. I did not make a vow. I made decisions. Call council, inventory accounts, change passwords, file for legal relief. My actions would do the work that words could not. That night in the kitchen had resolved the immediate conflict. The papers were in my hands, Rosa had the bank names, and Daniel had been seen in the act. The chapter closed not with a promise or a slogan, but with an action. I left the apartment with the pendant in my pocket and the sealed legal envelope on the table where Rosa would photocopy it. That envelope with Daniel's signature would be the definitive thing to contest. At the very end, when the sun finally hit the street with clean light, Rosa and I paused at the corner. She tightened her grip on my shoulder and said, "Bring the receipts to counsel. We'll take it step by step." Her voice was directing next moves, not offering platitudes. I nodded. I put my free hand into my pocket and felt the small circle of gold. It was heavy in an ordinary way. Then I took it out and slipped it on under my shirt so it would not catch on anything. The pendant rested against skin. We turned and walked. The building's key turned one more time behind us. The click was a small, concrete beat. The chapter ended with the sound of a lock and our footsteps on the pavement as we walked away toward the attorney's office and the bank, carrying receipts, a pendant, and the determination to name what had been done. That was the closure, paperwork in hand and a decision made.